Oh, hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well. Nice background. You switched from last time.
I did. I'm just gonna play with this light here.
Uh-huh, sure.
No.
That's funny. You're like, da 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 da. No, I
That'll
like
do.
that. I like that.
Okay,
I
that'll
like
do.
that. How are
That'll
you?
do, pig. That'll do.
How are you?
I'm okay. Yeah, it's just just a lot of Hello.
Hello. Oh my God. All dressed up
Hi.
and everything. Look at
Wait,
that.
hold on. Lady in red.
I'll take
Right?
it. I'll take it. You made me realize that I need to put my AirPods in, so give me one.
Okay.
Okay, sure.
I've got a shiny forehead. God. Horrible shiny forehead.
Oh, come on.
See
A
this
little,
light?
a little bit of shine doesn't hurt anybody.
Wait, that's better. It looks like I've got my shirt undone. Good
Oh
lord.
my God, your breasts look
Good
beautiful.
lord.
Where are they?
I don't have How is this start?
Sorry.
Fuck you. I don't know if Kendall can hear any of this. Probably.
No, but I'm sure
She
that
might
it'll be
be
perfect.
able to. Oh my God. Wow. All right. Welcome to Getting Juicy. You know, I don't even think we even said that yet. We basically this recording so far has almost sounded like we just accidentally left the recording button on. And we are just, I don't know.
Here we are.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh, what a perfect way to start the show. How are you?
Hi.
Hi. Did you hear any of that? What we were just saying?
I didn't. I'm so sorry.
Oh no, that's
don't be
good.
sorry. It'll give you incentive to watch it back when we put it out in the air.
Oh
Okay,
God.
I will be. I'll be creeping for sure.
Oh my
You
gosh.
can creep as much as you want. No limits barred.
Oh, you look freaking gorge, by the way. Absolutely. Holy Toledo.
Yeah.
Absolutely gorgeous. Where are you right now? Where in the world is Kendall?
I'm at home. I'm in Vancouver.
Nice.
I'm in my living room for the next 2 weeks because we're just about to move, actually, which I'm very excited about.
Oh, exciting. Where are you moving to?
Same area. We're still in Vancouver. Same area, but we just we need more space.
Yeah.
I feel like I was like totally fine with where we were living before we moved into this place in the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then Drag Race happened, and I not only had like the wardrobe of 2 people, but it was like the wardrobe of like 8,000 people. So I have a whole drag room coming into my new place. I'm very excited.
Oh my God.
It's getting to that point. It's getting to that point. You've been around for long enough and you've been exposed and out there and doing your thing. And you're
Right?
like,
Exposed.
I need to make it happen. You're like,
Is it
I'm
the
making it happen. The shoulders, the heart, the little bit of chest hair. I don't know. Let's make that pendant shine.
No, like me. I was like, I purposely shaved. Thank you very much.
Me
You
too.
look fantastic.
Oh
Wait,
my.
Rachel, you have chest hair?
Oh God. Okay. Already, just before you. Oh my gosh, this is a disaster. No, just before you popped on, I was like, my top button was undone, and I'm like, oh, my shirt's coming. What did I say? And then you're like,
you said my shirt's coming undone.
And I'm like, oh my,
exposed.
And then you said what chest or something like that. I'm like, fuck you, fuck you.
Read.
I know the library was open. That didn't even mean to be, but you got to create a little bit of a reaction, you know, a little bit of.
Women's chests come in all different shapes and
yes,
sizes.
they do, and they're beautiful. And she has a beautiful chest.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. Let's get back on track.
Totally. We're gonna introduce you. I know, right? Like, reel it back. Holy cow.
So I'm first and foremost, I am so grateful that you were willing to come chat with us for a little bit and hang out in the comfort of our homes and our gray walls. But really, it's just so grateful to Meet you. I'm in Vancouver as well, just in downtown. Rachel's over in Vernon, but grew up in North Van. And we usually chat a little bit before a guest pops on, so we didn't have a chance to introduce you. So what I would love to do is, if you wanted to introduce yourself, because we read your website, we know what you're about, but I love to actually have our guests introduce themselves and what they want to talk about, what they would like to share. If you have anything in your mind that you'd want to introduce yourself with.
Absolutely, I can definitely do an introduction. My
Yeah.
name is Kendall Gender. I am a drag performer here in Vancouver. I was most recently on season 2 of Canada's Drag Race, where I made it to the finale. Yahoo! Yeah, I've been doing drag since 2014, which seems like just yesterday, but the wrinkles will say something different.
Oh, come on. Where? No.
Say I don't have any.
No, I'll absorb them for you.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, I do drag full time. Feeling like super blessed to be able to live this life, especially coming out of the show and kind of like all of this sort of thing. Like really, when I think about the dream life that I could possibly imagine for myself at a very young age, I promise you, it is this. It is
oh my gosh.
what I'm living. So it's really, really, really cool. I feel extremely fortunate every single day.
Absolutely amazing. And thank you for that. And also, you have so many talents and gifts, including being a presenter, a host, and also being the winner of what I remember when I first heard your name was the winner of Vancouver's Next Drag Superstar. Because not being in the scene myself, but of course you hear things on media, you hear in the buzz of the words and stuff, and I heard your name and I'm like, damn, one, that's an awesome name, and two, I mean, I remember when that contest came out and other names that came from that. So who would have thunk, like, from that kind of exposure in Vancouver and from the community, that was a little seed that kind of took you to where you are now, and the processes along the way, I'm sure, were nothing but fantastic and transformative for you.
Absolutely, yeah. That was definitely the first like competition setting in drag that I like felt like I did a really good job and I really like sunk my teeth into. So to be able to win that was absolutely amazing. Yeah, it was a 5-week long competition many years ago. Yeah, it definitely is like training grounds for sure for drag race. That's like advice that I will give any drag performer. If like not necessarily like a big competition, but just like any competition is so vital. Even if you don't want to get on Drag Race or whatever your goal is, like it's so vital to like immerse yourself in the community, really meet people, and honestly just kind of like flex your skills a little bit and sort of like, you know, get to learn a lot about your artistry. I like highly recommend competitions.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked to a couple of drag performers or drag artists lately, and something that I think came up with Rogue, whom I believe you maybe know in Vancouver.
Absolutely, of course.
And they were just talking about how, you know, even just a couple years ago, the scene has just changed so much, I think, with maybe support of fellow artists. You know, it was so competitive, especially I mean, it always has been competitive, but especially in smaller cities. And Vancouver is starting to get bigger with it. But I think that they were just saying how only do they feel like now in the last little while is there more camaraderie and maybe just a little bit more support between performers, whereas before it was like, maybe, I don't know if, can you speak to that? I don't know if that's true, but how the landscape has changed, I guess, in that realm, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of that sort of is coming through with how popular drag is. You know what I mean? So in the forefront of pop culture right now. We're seeing it in so many different avenues, and obviously a lot of that has to do with the show. You're seeing it in a lot of, you know, campaigns and venues and everything. It's like drag everywhere, and I sort of think that it's created this really beautiful community because it's just there's such a wider like umbrella of acceptance, and I think that that's maybe where the community feels as if it's a little bit more sort of like uplifted. It's not necessarily like in the shadows, if you will, or like, you know, only in a bar, for example. I think it's just like it's in so many different venues, and I think that sort of comes with that support.
Yeah. Well, and also but like what you said, it's an art. It's a performance art. It's a form, right? Like it's this beautiful, where I think that maybe people didn't necessarily think of it as that. Maybe they didn't put it in that, you know, same or put on that same pedestal necessarily as like any other performance, right? Maybe. So it's really cool. It's great to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and in addition to what Rachel was saying in terms of drag, I find what's fascinating as well is that drag really breaks boundaries. Because I know, for example, there are certain people in our culture and media, both North America and I'm sure abroad, where they might have doors closed in front of them for, I mean, I guess that's kind of a two-part observation. So that's the first part, is that like doors might not be open to certain people if they were not in a drag persona, for example. Like if they showed up as their gendered self or as their born self, natural self. And then when they present in drag, especially if it's a second or even a first impression, they might be given more attention or actually validation because it's a different persona or a brand, you know? So you see people that are to modeling agencies or to other parts of media or have consultants or agents in their drag persona, but they might not initially have the same opportunity if they presented outside of drag. So do you find some people might go in their drag persona and then they might be more accepted or given the opportunity? And when they become more accepted or successful, they might be given more opportunity out of drag? Like, I'm not really sure how to ask the question, but it's a bit on my mind.
No, I totally get what you're trying to say. I think that there is a sort of innate confidence that comes with drag. So I think that sort of is an element to that when it comes to like the sort of opportunities and walking into certain rooms. There is also that huge element of drag sort of being a melting pot for a lot of different skill sets, right? You have to, you have to sort of be a stylist, a dancer, a performer, a host, an activist, all this kind of all wrapped into one. So you get to try your hands in a lot of different things. So I think that could also open up the opportunities after, because you've tried and sort of like shown all these different elements of yourself. You know what I mean? Like I've gotten way more elements within, or way more offers, within performing arts in drag than I ever did before I did drag. Absolutely. Like I was in theater before when I was a kid. I had like acting agent off and on throughout my early 20s, and honestly nothing really came from it. You know what I mean? And once I found drag, I'm now seeing the offers come in both for Kendall and Kenneth, which is my name out of drag. And that's actually, so it's kind of, it's an interesting observation. And I don't know what that, I think that, I mean, if we really dived into the psyche of it, I don't know if it's from feeling more confident within myself overall, or because I'm, in the public eye, or maybe a combination of both.
It's very fascinating. I don't know what I was going to say. Sorry, I was just like, I need some water.
Okay, well, I'll dive into the second observation of that while you gather your thoughts. Because that was the first part, but also the second part is as well as, I mean, one thing I will clarify, because some people don't always know, but when we have our folks on the show, we'd love to get to know them behind their persona, in the sense of like, people might know them, I know so-and-so from one thing, right? And that's great, like to expose and to express, but you get asked sometimes a lot of the same questions, or it can sometimes feel very kind of mechanical, even if it's not meant to be, right? So on our platform, which you might have had a check out, like we want to get to know who you are, like who is Kendall at the heartbeat of their soul, right? And therefore Kenneth. And so what I'm curious, you alluded to, yes, exactly, that's like my, anyways, that's my flamboyance. But I'm curious, and this is your comfort level, I'd like to make that very clear, it's a safe space, but I would love to get to know behind the mask, not your drag piece, but behind the mask of where did that all start from? Like if you take yourself all the way back to whatever you're comfortable reflecting on, where did all this come from? How did that all start as a kid and your family or your upbringing? Like what made you create it?
You have 30 seconds. No,
this is not a game show. This is not Drag Race.
I mean, that is actually, I mean, this is not exactly what you're asking, but that is one element that I found really cool about the show, is that it really, like, I feel like we were on camera, or like we got to share our stories in and out of drag almost equally. Whereas before, just Kendall is what I created all the time, but on the show you really get to show yourself out of drag a lot. So I found that very, I loved it personally. I found it
absolutely.
But yeah, when it comes to this sort of like idea of what we have here, I think it definitely started almost instantly. So my parents actually they didn't want to know my gender when I was born. They were very adamant about not knowing. So they actually made my room like a sort of gender non-conforming color palette. So my room as a child was red, black, and white, as opposed to it being, you know, gendered pink or blue. So when I instantly was a newborn baby, I think I really had this idea that like gender didn't really exist. And I was very fortunate to have that environment right away. So instantly I was flamboyant. Like from a very, very, very young age, I was, you know, wearing my mother's sun hats and like putting on her dresses and her pearls and like really living the full fantasy. And that was from a very young age. And it's almost interesting because I never really saw it as anything out of the ordinary until I started to be surrounded by other kids at school. My family was very supportive, and you know, the neighborhood that I grew up in and that sort of thing, that was all, everyone was very, you know, oh, that's just Ken, da 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 da. And then when I started going to school, then you sort of have this idea where you're like, oh wow, I am a little bit different than the masses. I think that, you know, there comes the beginning of dislocation within a queer identity. You know, I'm sort of in this environment where I don't feel as if I'm the same as everyone else.
Right.
And that came very, very quickly for me. Like right away within school.
Right.
So yeah, for me, when it came to that sort of like femininity and expression, it's been with me my whole life. So like when I started drag, no one was super surprised.
Did you grow up in Vancouver?
In Richmond, actually.
In Richmond, okay.
Yeah, nice, awesome, okay.
Yeah. But you know, people don't really know much about Richmond. I mean, there is like a certain demographic, or I should say, like, how do I put it? Like Richmond has a certain ethnicity, typically. So there's
has a cultural population.
Yeah, right. So you know, yes, when you're in your own neighborhood with your family and it feels all safe, and then you get out to perhaps a neighborhood or area where not only sexuality and gender, but also ethnicity and those kinds of things are different too, right? So, you know, I can only imagine. I read a little bit about you as well, about just, you know, being an advocate also for minorities and really standing up for inclusion and all the, and that's pretty awesome too. But did that part of it come from your upbringing as well, growing up at a young age, or is that part of it kind of later in adulthood that you wanted to really get into that kind of activism? And
yeah, I think activism definitely came within drag for sure.
Yes.
I wouldn't really have considered myself like a child activist.
That's kind of rare, I guess.
I mean, yeah.
Unless you're like Greta, what's her name?
Greta Thunberg. It's yeah.
I'll give it up for Greta.
Yeah.
I think that the experiences when it came to activism definitely tied to situations that I went through.
I guess that's what I mean. Yeah.
Like racial identity or disassociation, even within my own family, right? Like, you know, I'm mixed race, so I'm half black, half white, and there is a sort of sometimes level of confusion, I think, that I felt at home in certain ways, because you don't really 100% feel like you are either race, and sometimes people don't always view you as either race. You're sort of this like anomaly in certain situations. So I think that sort of tied into why I have been so passionate about sort of bringing my racial identity into my work, for sure. Just because I think that if I had seen someone that I had a little bit more understanding in, especially within the queer community when it came to their racial identity, I think it would have helped me as a teen or an adolescent.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Because, and you know, I can relate with that, even not being a drag persona myself. But again, we all, as queer people, just people in general, but particularly if we have anything that might be visual and invisible, I like to say visible and invisible, that might define us in a way that's different from our surroundings and our peers, like our mainstream school classmates or school settings, especially. We are in such an impressionable environment, and we're just trying to be who we are. So when we are in these environments that maybe we're not realizing, oh, we're not as similar, you kind of start to go through that inner inquiry of wondering, who am I? Where am I? Where do I belong? How do I navigate? What do I want to do about those things?
Mhm.
So can you, if you think about like wherever you went to elementary school or even high school, were there a few kind of main takeaways that you might have, you can kind of look back on and think, those are defining moments for who I am or what I would like to use with that knowledge that you might have learned from those observations?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it kind of like when I look back at it as an adult, I think I didn't really like visibly see a queer person until like the sixth or seventh grade, to the point where I understood that this person was queer,
Mhm.
and that is maybe not ideal. You know what I mean? Like you're
Mhm.
coming into like 12 or 13 years old where you really feel like you're the only girl in the world, honey.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just, you know what I mean? And like that really, like that's always kind of stuck with me.
Mhm.
And that's why like a lot of the work that I do as much as possible, I love doing all ages events. I like leading
Yeah.
events. I like getting into, like I do a lot of, speaking at schools and this kind of stuff. Like I love doing stuff like that because I just like, even if the kid doesn't realize it, or the youth doesn't realize it until many years later, maybe
Yes.
they'll have that association with, you know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, like I saw this queer person and they were succeeding and they were living life and they were happy. On both ways, for queer children and for also not, for also people that don't identify as queer. You want to have that positive sort of experience with them because the repercussions can be so many, you know what I mean? If you're giving them this positive kind of like uplifting experience, talking and whatever, like just kind of vibing out and doing that, like I wish I had more of that when I was younger. I think
Absolutely.
I would have loved it, even if I would have pretended like I was too cool in high school. Like of course people do that, like we all do.
Of
And
course.
uh,
Yeah.
I would have gone home and been like, oh, that was sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
it's so true though, because I mean, growing up, I mean, we've aged ourselves on this show a million times. So, Hero and I are actually, believe it or not, we're like almost a decade apart from each other. So there's a big differences between maybe when he went to high school, when I went to high school, but we didn't have a lot of that exposure to things that maybe weren't quote unquote the norm, or what was, accepted to talk about in schools. Mind you, similarly, almost because you were just saying, your family was so accepting, and it's just all you knew was just who you are, and it was just like, this is me. There's no label to it. Like there wasn't necessarily a label. So when I was growing up, I had a gay uncle who was a ballet dancer and he ended up as the director of the National Ballet Company of Canada for a number of years. But the reason I'm saying this is because for me, yes, growing up, I didn't have that exposure to it, but it was in my family, and I never knew. I just knew my uncle had a partner, and his partner was a man. They slept in the same bed. Awesome. They came over all the time. They were awesome and fun. And like, it was just my uncles. Like I didn't think of the word gay, or what that wasn't, it was just people, And so I was lucky and fortunate to have had that exposure, but not everyone does. Now, do you feel like nowadays talking to kids or teens is that finally changing? Because it kind of sounds like it is,
Yeah,
which is great.
I see such a difference within like this generation, if you will,
Awesome.
myself,
Yeah.
in so many ways. And I mean, even when I think about it, when I was in high school, my school didn't even have like a GSA. Like it didn't exist in the school at all. And
Right.
like which is so crazy because I feel like almost every school has like some sort of a club or alliance now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
I don't mind. Yeah, I don't think mine did either.
and so like regular,
Yeah.
it would be more strange. Even if you're not involved, it'd be just strange if it didn't exist within your school, right?
Yeah.
Totally.
Even in something small like that, we're seeing such a change. And I think the cool part about it is that like people don't really like, I haven't noticed a lot of people like flinching when it comes to certain things. um I'll give you an example. So my partner is trans, and
Mhm.
she has a younger brother who is 16, I believe now.
Okay.
And he had such an easy time dealing with her transition when it came to pronouns changing, the name changing, correcting, saying sister as opposed to brother. Really simple sort of like things within conversation. It was very, very, very easy for him. It happened like almost overnight. Whereas other members of her family, it just, especially within the language, it could be a little bit more difficult to sort of like to rewire your brain. Coming from a different generation. And that's not to say her family is amazing now and accepting, but there was, of course, there's hurdles to get over, especially when it comes to conversation. But I just noticed how quickly he adapted to it, and I think that really does come with the generational shift.
Absolutely.
I think you're right, because in terms of even, I think me and you, Kendall, might be the same age or within a year or two of each other. Like I just turned 30, so which is interesting to say. But like I think because Rachel, again, with her being in a different generation in terms of high school, like a couple different generations, and then you can think about. Well, come on, it's true though. But
I know.
No tea, no shade. But like seriously, when you think about growing up, and you went to school in Ridgeon primarily, I went to school primarily in East Van. Grew up in Carrigsdale, but I went to King David, like at 41st and Willow for a year. So that was very much like pretty much white bread and very Jewish and not much diversity. Went to the alternative program of Eric Hamber, Total Education, which is basically like a mini school. And so that exposure and that cultural diversity definitely gave a lot of differences, and especially there were more queer individuals there too. But my point for this anecdote is that even for me, I was very, very effeminate when I was in my teenage years. That was just my natural behavior. And I kind of felt like, as you were saying, like I was always very different and expressive and sensitive and wanting to express through clothing and through being flamboyant and really being extra. And I remember kind of feeling like the metaphor is that if you were on stage and the red velvet curtain comes up and you're like, I'm here, and the lights down on you and you're like ready, and then there's no one in the audience. And you're kind of like, I'm 12 or 13. I know enough of who I am. Why do others not see it or feel it or are on the same wavelength? And I'm sure a lot of queer folks, especially depending where they grew up or how they grew up, might feel similar, where it's like, well, I've done this work or I'm proud of like this part of myself, but then no one else seems to even know what to do with it or to understand it. So I think you're right. In this generation now, like, 10 years later, there's enough exposure in media and equality and rights that people are like, yeah, we love and support you no matter what. And if there's discrimination, it isn't tolerated nearly as much. And it's more inquiry, and here's how you can learn about that. Let me help educate you, instead of it being in Vancouver, we're privileged, but like having that less fear-based tactic and more about, oh, how do I learn about this? I don't know if like that makes sense or not, but I think it goes in hand with what you're talking about, talking to kids in high schools now that maybe are more kind of drawn and more advocate, more not afraid to be allies. There's no shame in being an ally of someone that might be different, right?
That's so true. That's so true.
Yeah.
It's fun. I mean, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit because I think that is so true. But then how come do I also feel like there seems to be, maybe it's because it's more in the media, but that there's more violence and there is more kind of coming up against this amazing freedom that's happening for the LGBTQ plus community. Why does it also feel like at the same time, like there's more obstacles? Do you know what I mean? Like it kind of like, it feels, maybe it's because it is more accepted. And so therefore there's more pushback. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm also probably thinking more of the States, the US. I mean, it's all you, right?
Another thing that we do have to think about is like when it comes to certain obviously things going wrong. I'm trying to find the right way to the most polite way to word that.
Yes.
A really heavy media exposure world that we're living in.
Yes.
Like, right.
Yeah.
We live in a world where everyone has a cell phone and everyone is willing to take a video at every second. So I not to downplay, obviously there's tons of it going on, but I also wonder if some of it is just, we're just seeing it constantly.
True. Yeah.
Whereas I don't know if there's necessarily, I actually don't know, like I don't have any information about this, whether there is a rise or not.
Yeah.
Be the amount that we're seeing it.
True. Yeah. I think I'm just also thinking like in relation to, you know, racial stuff too. And like we talk like we're Jewish and we talk about like, I mean, there's, oh my God, the anti-Semitism and like the uprising of even that, and like what the fuck is going on, you know?
Yeah.
Like seriously.
Kind of work.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, just was kind of playing devil's advocate in that sense. But we'll get on to a happier topic.
Do you have a question, Rachel?
No, actually, well, I was going to talk about Kendall. Well, I didn't. We were going to talk about your how much of an advocate you are. So what are you doing that, like, what kind of groups or what kind of things are you doing in your advocacy work in Vancouver that you can talk about, like, very specifically?
Yeah, so actually right now, as of literally yesterday, I just launched a fundraiser that I'm doing for a local community member who's going through her transition, and she is looking for a little bit of assistance with her gender affirming surgeries. So I am launching event or hosting an event, excuse me, at the end of February for Black History Month with an entirely Black and biracial cast, and we are raising money for this lovely girl. This show that I'm doing is called Visible. So I've been putting on Visible for a number of years here in Vancouver, and I think that Visible sort of was created out of a pocket that I saw in the community, if you will, or a lack of specific types of representation. I felt like a little bit of an anomaly in certain ways. I was like, oh wow, I'm sort of different than a lot of the performers when it comes to my race. And I wanted to make sure to create a space in Vancouver where people and visible minorities really felt like they had a safe space, and they felt uplifted, and they felt like they could use the stage for whatever art they wanted to create.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've been putting it on for a number of years. We did it virtually last year, and I always do them as fundraisers as well, for whatever cause is sort of speaking to me or speaking to the heartbeat of the world at the moment.
Perfect. And can people support that by not just going in person, but they can support it online too?
Yeah, so I have everything listed on my Instagram right now. So I have the event, obviously, which the proceeds and all that kind of stuff from the event will be going towards it. And then the person also has a GoFundMe set up. So if you're not in Vancouver or you're not able to obviously attend for whatever reason, she does have a GoFundMe, and that is all linked on my social media.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I did see that post that you put up as well. Then keeping very loving eyes on your feed just to know what you're up to. And it's great to see the advocacy work that you are doing. But in addition to that, in the other accolades you've been able to create for yourself, again, just based on your own words on your website, I mean, I can only imagine the success and the joy it must have been to perform at the Rugby Sevens, for example. Like that must have been, how did that come about? Were you asked? Did you apply? Did someone recommend you?
Yeah, they reached out to my management company requesting me do a little ditty. And I'm totally honest with you, when I first got it, like a few months before the actual date, I wasn't 100% sure what it was.
That's totally fair. Yeah.
I'm not. I wasn't a sporty girl.
No.
And when I obviously got the invitation, I looked it up, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, I know what this is. It's when the whole city is flooded with costumes.
Yeah.
It's so fun. And I was like, holy shit, this is huge.
Huge deal.
Yeah.
And then they sort of released more information about like where it was, when it was, all that stuff. I found out that it was at literally BC Place where they performed. And I was
unreal.
It was unreal.
Yeah.
I get chills just thinking about it. It was the craziest thing I've ever done. And it's really, my partner was actually with me, and she, whenever we talk about it, she says that leading up to it, I was very calm. I was just kind of like putting on my hair, zipping up my below bodysuit, and I was like kind of pacing around. I was like, okay, yeah, 15 minutes. Okay, cool, 10 minutes. And then I performed, and then it was done. And then after, it all hit me.
Yeah. The anticipation was actually not before, it was after, which is interesting.
I went in like work mode kind of thing, and I was like, hey, I'm performing. I'm here to do this and do a good job. And like also when you're in like an arena like that, if you're I was standing right in the center. People, I mean, there was almost 50,000 people there.
Wow. insane.
And
Oh my
you
gosh.
can't really tell how many people are around you until
Right.
you see the footage back and you hear
Oh.
screams. Like the screams and everything is so delayed. You have like an earpiece in to play the music so that the music is the same throughout the theater. There's so many like crazy things.
Yeah.
But anyways, you almost feel like you're just in this tiny little like bubble to yourself. And then when I saw the videos after, I was like, holy
Oh my
Incredible,
God.
right? It was like you're Janet Jackson at the Super Bowl.
woo! Yeah, it was
Without the malfunction.
no,
Yeah, hopefully.
I was
yeah.
full Beyonce Super Bowl fan.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that was one of like that absolutely
Unbelievable.
I've ever done in my life. Like insane.
When something like when you do something that is that huge, were you in your body? Like, were you out of body? Like, were you present? Do you like, I'm just I can't imagine. I don't even think I would have been present.
Yeah, it's very out of body. I think that well, can I say I think one more time? I think that a lot of performers can relate to that. I think that getting on stage becomes an body experience. Sort of speaking of Beyonce, you've heard her speak of her alter ego, Sasha Fierce.
Of course.
Yes.
How a person kind of emerges when the lights go up. And I definitely do feel that. I think that sometimes I look back at footage of myself and I'm like, whoa, look at her go.
Yeah.
No kidding. No kidding.
And actually, that's an interesting segue, perhaps, into Drag Race because
No, I was.
were you think? Oh God, Kendall, like we know each other so well. Like, what did you think? Okay, you go. What did you think I was going to ask about what Scarlett said?
Oh
No?
no.
Okay. That's funny. Okay.
The password is Rachel.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. No, I was just gonna say, just not maybe being fully present and how it's just so much going on. And I remember because we talked to Scarlett Bobo like a while ago, and as well, we were talking to Maddie, and Maddie was saying when he was there, it was so isolating because, and it wasn't during the pandemic even, but I think just because of a lot of these reality shows, you might get to be housed with everybody, but in Drag Race's case, maybe it was on the second season too, I'm guessing you're in your own hotel room, is that right? Like it's not like you were living with everybody and get that camaraderie and all that kind of stuff like you do obviously when you go to film, but it was just also like so quick and so bam that like he was just saying he feels like he was just on autopilot in a way the whole time, and then it was like, holy shit, okay, it's done, and like, what did I do? Like, I did it, I know, but like, was I even present? Was I even, like, how did it feel for you, the whole process?
I actually relate to that a lot, especially for us because we were filming in the pandemic. So it was it was like we had isolation periods and then further filming within this sort of like another level of isolation.
Yeah,
I think it's like it is sort of that out of body experience. I think even sometimes watching the show back, I can kind of like I don't want to say I forgot what I did, but it is a little bit like autopilot, or like it just happens so quickly, and it's I was on stage for like a month straight, if that. So
yes.
Like, watching the show back, sometimes it was very entertaining because I was like, oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Sort of element, and I think that like if I could go back, I think I would have preferred to be a little bit more present because of how amazing it was in so many. But I felt like I was like, there's just a lot of like, there's a lot going on. But I wish I could like taken those moments maybe like once a day and like, hey, this is where you are. This is what you're doing. This is so cool. Even if stuff goes wrong, it is what it is. Because I felt like that as soon as I left.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you can kind of, but it's hard. It's hard when you're actually there because there's just so many things. It's like
absolutely.
Yeah.
Many directions.
Well, for sure. And again, I'm guessing it was a pretty similar process, but we've had some people that are from different franchises that are also in the States, like not from Drag Race, but from different shows. And so it's always slightly different. So I'm kind of curious to know what your process was like for the idea of I want to be on the show and then applying for it, and just kind of your steps at because you might still be on a contract. We have no idea what you're disposed to say or not. But with what you can share, I'm curious to know more about your process, kind of more in depth about getting there and be like, holy shit, I'm here. Okay,
Yeah.
now I'm in this environment. Holy shit, I don't know who I'm competing with. And then, of course, now that it's out, you see who you're competing with. Like, I'm curious to know more about those things from your perspective and how you felt like on a visceral level.
Yeah, I mean, so I applied for season 1 when it first came out,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like so ready. I was like, oh yeah, I'm working all the time, blah blah blah. Like I'm totally gonna get this. And then, and I was like so sad. I was very, I just felt very like down. I was like, oh my, I was like convinced that I was going to get it.
Yeah, I get that.
When I didn't, I was like, I was very disappointed. So I kind of was just like, I put it out of my head, if you will.
Yeah.
When the second season came around, I almost felt like I was putting less pressure on myself throughout the application process, because I was like, well, if it doesn't happen, I'm not going to be like devastated like I was the first year.
Mm-hmm.
It's what it is, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just going to try again. I'm just going to like have fun, be chill, do all these interview videos like I'm hanging out with my partner because and that was it. And it ultimately, I think that's the mentality that you have to go in. You have to go in with like, I think the first year when I was applying, I put so much pressure on it. I was so stressed out, and I was like, and I think they can tell that reads. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
if this is like, ooh, you're vibrating the entire time, it definitely like it reads, and like it's people don't want that for this kind of environment.
Right.
So by the time it actually did happen, I was like so chill to an extent. You know what I mean? So like when I actually got that first call, I was like gobsmacked happy. I was like, you know what I mean? It was like, I was so happy. Like I literally, like I was bawling my eyes out. My lap. Like I was just so happy, and I was just so proud of myself. And it just like, yeah, I just felt like so many years of my hard work finally like came to like what my ultimate goal was.
Yeah.
Like that, just being on the show is such a like win within itself.
Oh yeah.
It's so validating though. Like I think really that's, you're like, okay, yeah, I know this, I guess that is the word, validating. And also I still don't know how performers can deal with the rejection, because even like as an actor or whomever it is, like, I mean, you could be the best goddamn singer on the planet, but if somebody is just not looking for, you know, your right eye is just a little too low, or like something super stupid, like, you know, that your I don't know, your cheekbone is like whatever. Like I don't know how people, how do you deal with that? Because you probably have had to in the past before.
Absolutely. And then
Grace too.
Well, then you sort of add another element onto that, because you get this huge opportunity, but then you deal with the show where there is tons of critiques.
Right.
Tons of rejection.
Of course.
Yeah.
And that element was definitely jarring. Especially when you're on such a big platform and you're like, you're so happy to be there, and you're like, hey, my dreams have come true. And then it's like, well, bitch, maybe, you know? And yeah, it can definitely be jarring, especially when you're there. But I think once I went through the show and sort of disconnected a little bit, I feel completely different about it. Like, about and the sort of like judgment aspect of it post show than I did when I was actually there. So I think now how I truly feel is that, like, I think not just within drag, but I think within a lot of aspects of life, I think if you feel validated in like what you are presenting to the world, and you're comfortable and confident within yourself, you know, whether that's wearing a bodysuit or wearing a suit and tie to work, I think it's very important to remember that like you have to be happy first. They don't like how you look or what you're doing or how you present, whatever. It's very important to remember that like you have to like it first.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Then that's, you know, that's such a big part of life. And like now I feel way more confident than I ever have in my entire life. And I think some of that kind of comes from maybe getting knocked down a few pegs in certain
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
you almost then have to develop that sort of inner confidence inside yourself in order
Yep.
to feel good.
Yeah.
Doing that today.
Yes.
Yeah, when you make a really good point about that as well, because I mean, in terms of being in such a production like Drag Race and then representing the country in that sense, and we can now see how being on a season of a franchise and seeing where that can take somebody to other, of course, spin-offs of the franchise or exposure in their own city across the country. What I'm curious about as well is like, of course, you have the tour coming up in the summer, right? So you'll be going around, which is super
Yes.
exciting. And I know you were in Montreal visiting your sisters there, and just again, you've done so much even from the show. So what I'm curious about is like before any of that kind of happened as a result of being on the show, when you showed up, like I'm guessing again, we know that the queens are in a hotel, and so like, does all the filming happen in whatever production studio and the main stage is there too? Like, do they break it up at all, or is it you're literally all there and everything you need is at your access to film and to do your work?
Yeah, I mean, the studio is in one like big area.
Okay.
Without breaking the contract, I think
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
no knowledge that we're in a hotel during the other hours,
Hmm.
but everything would be like in studio. Yeah, like the
Okay.
workroom and the main stage and all that kind of fun stuff. It's all
Mhm.
one magical area.
Yes.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it is just as magical being there as it looks like on TV. Like I think
Uh,
it has a lot to do with it. Of course, the lighting is beautiful in post production, and
Mhm.
Yeah.
but when you're there, like especially walking into the workroom, like that is like walking into Disneyland. Like it,
Okay.
I bet.
there's no, it's not TV magic. Like it's
Yeah.
a big room that looks exactly like that, and you feel that sort of like energy and vibe, and it's like
So cool.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, what was it like for you to be around that much talent and that much of sisterhood, right? Because I've always been curious, what's it like to be around all those incredible people? Some you might know of, or actually know or have worked with, which in your case, you've worked with some of these individuals very closely, some of your friends. And what were those dynamics? And I'm not speaking of it from a reality show perspective, but I'm speaking of it just from a personal perspective, like where you're competing with people that you care about, and yet it's about yourself. And then, in addition to that, being exposed to different people in our culture, our country that you maybe admire, maybe look up to. And what were some of those experiences like for you? And did they have an impact on how you view yourself in drag? How you view yourself now being now post production being in Vancouver again? I'm curious to know more about
You
your
kind of
development.
read my mind because I was going to go into like, well, in a way I was also wondering that, and if you were able to meet any of your idols, or was there an idol? I know there's a lot of questions there, but
well, I when it comes to the other drag performers, I think that
yes.
that's the coolest things about the show is that like you are getting ready with like a bunch of different artists
Yes.
Mhm.
every single day. So like for example, my makeup has gotten way better post show and like during the show because of little tips and tricks that I learned from the other
Mm,
getting ready next to them and being like, oh, is that how you do that? Oh, is that how you
yeah.
that was so cool just within itself. Uh, and I think that I always say that like if you did Drag Race and like you ended up at the very end exactly how you were in the beginning, then because there's such an opportunity to learn so many different things like about yourself and your skills and all and your artistry
Mhm.
within that experience from the judges, from the other girls, from everything, or the other
Yeah.
performers, I should say.
Mhm.
And I think that when it comes to like competing with your sisters, I think that there's a heavy balance. You know what I mean? Of course, you're there for yourself, and of course, at the end of the day, it is just within a competition within yourself. But it's cool to have that camaraderie. You know,
Oh
because
yeah.
there's you're all sort of there in a similar mindset. And you're also being put in together in a group of girls that you might have not necessarily got the chance to meet, right? Especially not in quarantine. Um,
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think about Pythia, who is the closest performer that I met on the show. That I got like we're the closest like post show, but we were not
Right.
friends. Is what I'm trying to say. Uh, and I mean, she lives in Montreal, So
Yeah.
I've really seen her on a very regular basis, and I've gotten to see her tons since the show, and obviously while we were filming. That relationship is just so cool because like we were really put together because of Drag Race.
Yes.
Yes.
Coming in, like we're the only ones that can say that we came in the same place as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Second and third, like you're just the runners up, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, not just the runners up.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah. You're the top 3 in the country.
There's this really cool sort of like camaraderie that like we have, and like we might not have necessarily, we might have maybe met at some show like randomly throughout the years, but like that relationship is so cool because it really from Drag Race.
Absolutely. And then when it comes to the judges or any special guest judges, was there a favorite that you were excited to have critique you?
Yeah, I think I mean it was kind of unfortunate because it was the week that I had to lip sync, but I think Gigi Gorgeous was my absolute favorite guest judge. I was like, gob smack. Found out that she was going to be there, and like honestly, she is like distractingly beautiful. Like
right.
like when you're walking down the runway and she's sitting there like glistening in diamonds. It's like a hard time like looking where I was supposed to look.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and like absolutely she was my favorite guest judge. I just think that she is such an icon for our community, and she's just been so open to like so much of her life. And I've just always respected that about her. And yeah.
Love it.
That's really, really awesome. And I'm guessing one thing I am curious, I haven't asked this question to anybody else, just it hasn't come up, but to the viewers, when we see in the edits and stuff, and you see the judges like speak with you, and I love how on Canada's Drag Race that it's Canada's Drag Race. Like no offense to RuPaul at all, but like there's equal representation of people that are representing the country. So it's kind of like a collective family feeling. Which is, I'm guessing, part of the intent. But what I'm curious to know is like, do you and your fellow castmates have the ability to bond and connect with your fellow judges in different ways, or are they really there for that 5 minutes, giving you a challenge, let's say, and kind of checking in on you, giving you a bit of feedback, and then on the runway, like then they're there deliberating? Like, is that really the minimal exposure that there is for you, or do you get to build a relationship with them?
I think you build a relationship with them, but it is in a specific way. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
The only thing you do have with them are the critiques, or on the main stage, or those small sort of like interactions. I think a huge element to do with that was COVID. We were all in bubbles, so that's an element to it as well. But I think the cool part about it is like after the show, I've gotten to sort of like get to know them a lot more. You know what I mean? You get to learn a lot more about them once the sort of show, that judge competitor element sort of dissolves of sorts.
Yes.
That part has been really cool. Like, you know, Brad shared his sobriety story with me on the finale episode, and like we've gotten to talk about that post show on like those things are very, very, very cool. But during the show, it's you feel as if they care for you 100%.
Good.
Yes.
It's not. I wouldn't say it's not cold. It's not disconnected in that way. I think it's disconnected because of how the show is set up. I don't necessarily think that it's like they didn't just shut off as soon as the series was done. Like or like comment on my stuff and like, you know, react to my stories and that sort of thing. There's definitely that like that connection there.
Amazing. No, that's good. And I'm glad to hear that, because sometimes you don't know that. And I think it would be very jarring if you were on such a production and then you didn't have that kind of closure or follow-up if you wanted to have that with those people, because you do spend a lot of experiences with those individuals. They do critique your work, which is your job, but you're also human too. And they want to see you succeed. And of anyone, Brooklyn Heights, because, you know, it's the Canadian syndicate of the show and people all around our country, which will continue to grow. So we both appreciate you being so willing to share and to open about that from, you know, your perspective as a performer and as a human, as opposed to just being on a reality show. You know, it's far beyond that. One thing we wanted to connect with you about before we kind of wrap and kind of tie this down, and graciously of your time being here with us, Kendall, is if you are comfortable and if you want to, is there anything you want to share with other folks that might be in situations you might have, have been um, not victorious, but that you have overcome, that you have broken through, that you have come on the other side of, whether if it is sobriety, whether if it is um, your any marginalized communities that you might be part of that you represent so strongly? What would you leave with those people that might be wanting to, maybe they might feel inspired or heard by someone like yourself?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, when it comes to the sort of like marginalization, I think that it's very important to remember that like your community can also be created. So I think if you're feeling, like where you're growing up or who you're around, you don't necessarily always connect with, I think that it's important to remember that you can create your own community and you can create the sort of world around you, even if those people don't maybe live next door to you. You can connect with people online or through different sort of like avenues. And I think that the community that I have around me has saved me in so many ways and also created me in a lot of ways. I think they are the reason that I am the way I am. And I think that that's why I personally find it so important to always give back to the community, because of how much I feel on a daily basis, like uplifted and supported by them. And I think that that's just really important to remember. This goes for like all genders, all sexualities, is that like, remember that a community around you is very, very, very important. And there's always someone who will be around you or wants to talk to you. You're never like 100% just like alone in the dark forever. There's always some person out there who will respond or interact with you or connect with you in that way. And I think that it's super, super, super important to remember, because there's been times in my life where I felt very alone and very isolated, and felt like there was no one who even cared about me. But looking back on that so many years later from those moments, I know that that's not true. So it's always important to remember that.
But I love what you said, because I think that so much of the time we're trying to maybe seek instead of what you just said. Like, you have it inside of you also to create, right? That's really important. So thank you for sharing that. That's a great way to sort of end our conversation. We are, again, just so fortunate to have had you on and for you just to say yes, because you just never know, but you never know unless you ask. So we really, 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 really appreciate it. Just one last thing, if there's how we can find you. I know you've got a fundraiser coming up, which we will definitely put in the show notes about how to contact you and reach you and follow you and all those kinds of things. But if there's any last little, thing about how we can support you, or I know you've got a tour coming up, or tickets available still.
Available for the Canada's Drag Race Season 2 tour through Boss Events, which is super exciting. I'm so excited to like get back out there and do my thing. Find me on most social media platforms, Kendall Gender or some sort of derivative of that. Hopefully I get to see you in your city soon.
I know. And I was like, I think Hero and I need like a makeup tutorial. At least I do. I've never.
I'll put you in drag.
Oh
my God, that would be incredibly fantastic.
It appears. So.
Oh my God. Oh my God, you could be my drag mother. That would be incredible.
We already have drag names, don't we?
Yes.
We do. What are they?
Well, okay, Rachel. Okay, fine. So mine, I think I might have mentioned it to you in our DMs and stuff when you first responded back, and then I like kind of lost my head for a second, was like celebrating my apartment when you messaged. But I would say my drag name would be Kosher Pickle.
Ooh,
I love.
So campy, flamboyant, very like like show, like Broadway show, kind of like that, kind of like Nina West inspired, but obviously me.
I love that. I love that. I don't know where mine came from. That was like very recent. And I don't even have an explanation for it, but cinnamon swirl.
Oh, I like that.
Cinnamon swirl.
Yeah.
Not cinnamon buns.
No. You know that my like absolute like favorite kind of like little snack is cinnamon buns. So
Oh my God, I love
Ooh.
that. I love that. And also I think about fun dunkers, like mini donuts.
Oh yeah. Now
That would be fun.
cinnamon buns with or without raisins.
either. I like
Okay. Okay.
Mm.
I like, yeah, I do too.
Mm.
If I had to choose, I'd probably choose with the raisins though. Like
Mm.
with or without.
I go both ways. I could do with or without.
I'd love me a little bit of versatility, but I gotta add to
Perfect.
that is on Vancouver, Solly's Bagelry, their cinnamon buns, and then adding some vanilla bean ice cream. That was like my inner
Whoa.
child fat boys breakfast whenever I had a chance to. Those were the best.
Shout out to them if you want to send Kendall Gender some cinnamon buns. We would love that.
Yes.
Our thing.
Sponsor us.
Sponsored, great. Sponsored by Sully's. I don't know. This is the bagel.
Ooh, now we're getting real juicy.
Okay. Thank you again, Kendall.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night, great day ahead of you, and we will share this with you when it's out. And thank you so much for your support. We can't wait to see what everything happens for you this year.
Thank you guys.
Okay.
Bye.
Lots of love. Bye.
Juicy.